Hello there and welcome to the Century Hour with me, David Damakin, and today I'm joined by Nick. He's a man that I've worked with for around 3 or 4 years at a special school in Somerset. He worked in the base, which is a inclusion area, so children that are not coping with class, they could go to Nick and he would put strategies in place with a team of adults. It would then be his job to calm them down enough to take them back to class if possible. Nick also worked in the sixth form centre, he worked in primary, he worked in Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4, so across the whole school. And I will honestly say that I never met a student at the school that didn't have a positive relationship with Nick. So I got a lot of my traits, I would say, working with children with autism and special needs from Nick. He sort of taught me a different way of doing things, sort of being more human with the child rather than just going down the same old route, which I was doing before. I'm not too, sad to admit. So in that case, I'll just introduce you. Hello, Nick.
Hi, Dave. All right?
Yeah, I'm good. This is the first interview that I have done, so bear with us. We will get there in the end. It will be a little bit all over the place, but I'm sure we'll get some good points across.
We both have some anxiety, don't we?
Yeah, I think so. So firstly, Nick, tell us a bit about yourself.
Okay, so I'm a dad of 3 children, and I think they have had a profound effect on me in terms of my ability to work with kids with special needs. My first son has some profound disabilities. And that's been a real journey for me, trying to understand how I can meet his needs. He's taught me a huge amount, and I've applied what he's taught me to working with the kids I work with. It's expectations are completely changed in terms of you have a child with, you have the expectations of having a normal child, and then having to try and reevaluate that and understand what you expect from that child, and as they grow, learning with them. And he taught me so much about sensory perception, his sensory needs, non-verbal communication. So that's been huge, just trying to meet his needs, and then when I've worked with kids, that's enabled me to use those skills. So
Can I ask, have you always had a calm demeanour when dealing with children? Because the thing that come across to me the most is when I've worked in different schools and provisions, that sometimes the first instinct can be to go in, maybe raise your voice slightly and try and get the child's attention, whereas with you it was almost real understated from the minute that I met you, really. So for example, I remember one time I was teaching at the front of the class and I didn't realise that you were actually in the room. I think you were afterwards, when I spoke to another member of staff, she said you were in there for 5 or 10 minutes, but because you were so quiet and calming with that student, I didn't even know you were there.
Yeah, I think I've taken that from the parenting I had. I think particularly from my mum, who I don't recall having an argument with. She's amazing.
Yeah.
She would always explain things. She'd always let me do my thing, and then if I had an issue, it was always from her. It was about trying to understand what went wrong with me, and then unpicking that, and then building on that. So, and that's, I suppose, what I've taken from her.
Because I think a lot of the things that I've taken from you is the explaining to the student. I remember lots of times that I'd be almost banging my head against a brick wall thinking, why isn't this working? I can see other people that are building relationships with students, and it hit me that maybe I wasn't effectively communicating to the child. So meeting their needs and just not explaining things well enough for them, they didn't understand what I expected from them and what I needed them to do at that time, possibly.
Yeah, I think that's where Ollie's come in for me, in terms of, so I have a child who can't communicate, and you have to go through a whole different route to try and meet someone's needs who can't communicate. And I think that's really common with autistic individuals who, on the face of it, quite often look like they can communicate, but have, a disability in communication. And non-verbal communication is really a really kind of important part for. It's really tricky to explain. So my son, he has visual issues, he has sensory issues, and just trying to, I can remember how many times I've sat on the sofa thinking, right, what does he need right now? What do I need to do for him? And that's now 14 years of trying to understand someone who can't actually communicate. So when I'm presented with, a young person who is struggling to communicate their needs, Ollie's given me those skills. 14 years. It's like he's given me a degree or masters or PhD in trying to understand a non-verbal person, which is really great that he's taught me that I can take that from him. That's the skills he's given me, and then I can apply it to supporting other people, which is great.
Would you say that you are almost in tune with him then, so that you don't really have to use any words at all? Just to this point now, if Ollie just has a look or says a sound or moves in a particular way, you'll be able to go, it's either this or it's one of two or three things.
Totally, yeah. To the point where I was, when he was having seizures and he could be in another room.
Have you needed the toilet?
And
we have got children in the house.
Yeah.
That is why you're hearing that, and that is fine. That's what I want this to be, like a homemade podcast. There's no studios involved. Sorry, Nick, carry on.
Yeah, so I can't think what I was saying. Where were we?
We were talking about being in tune, and you were saying that I asked you if there was a certain look or a movement.
Oh yeah, okay.
And you were talking
yeah.
about that when Ollie was having seizures, for example.
So if I was at the point where I could be in another room and feel that I needed to go to his room if he was in bed asleep.
Okay.
To that point that I could walk in there and then he would start having, like, he was either starting to have a seizure or not.
Okay.
There's something there. There's something, and that brings me to some other bits and pieces. I do a lot of reading, in particular Dan Siegel, who is to me he's amazing, and there is a little bit that he's talked about where there is obviously there's the light spectrum of energy.
Okay.
And once upon a time we only were aware of the sun, that kind of light, and then scientists realised that was infrared and the rest of it. Now he's sort of going down the route now that he honestly thinks that there are energies. It sounds a bit out there, but released from people.
Okay.
In terms of that other you can pick up on. You can almost pick up on that, and you can pick up on where people are at, and kind of, and that I think Ollie's taught me that, just being more aware of just because obviously our go-to thing is communication, it's language, it's like and so he's taught me a whole different form of communication and to look at that rather than just going straight to verbal communication. And I think especially with so many kids, whether they have gaps in their development or because of being neglected or whatever that is, quite often communication is something they really struggle with. Communication of emotions, communication of just their needs, and trying to understand and look at something. The kind of non-verbal stuff is massive. Yeah,
I agree with that. Moving on slightly, there has been all these stories in the news recently about Mendip House, where I'll briefly touch it now because I feel like we should, considering the sort of national story it was, where it's a home run by the National Autistic Society where they were caring for people with autism. Some have been there like 40 years. Lots of nasty stories coming out of people that were neglecting them and maybe just not understanding their needs. I've had a few, shall we say, debates on Twitter with a few people that are obviously very, very upset and just not happy about how it's all gone down. My views on the subject is that people with autism on a whole will lose because of this, because some people will, obviously the people in the home were neglected and they lost out, and now the National Autistic Society have got a massive job in building trust and building that back up again, and there's lots of positive things they do which we with legislation and resources and just lots of things like that. And yeah, I just think it's just disappointing all around. And what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's a similar thing. I mean, it's
a difficult subject.
Yeah, it's terribly sad that this happens, and obviously there are some elements of society that are still stuck in, in the Middle Ages. In terms of meeting the need and understanding the need. There's so many elements so many issues there. We were talking earlier about, in terms of training and pay. I mean, it's a massive job to look after someone with high needs, whether that's autism or special needs or disability, and so many of the care staff are untrained, they're underpaid, they're overstressed, they're not given any kind of supervision or support.
No.
Dealing with difficult situations, so they come into work, without the skill base, and I'm not letting these people off, obviously.
No, 100%.
But I mean, you wouldn't I feel like this with schooling as well, where you have a very complex kind of thing in front of you. Say like an IT specialist.
Yeah.
And you have a complex computer, like a really, really highly complex computer, which kind of represents, say, I don't know, an autistic person, and they just bring someone off the street to work with it. It wouldn't happen.
No.
These people need a huge amount of support and, the best training and, the best trained people to support them in their kind of, in their journey. But it's just that absolute, it's crazy that the pay can be so low.
Yeah, and
it's part of it.
And I agree as well. Sorry, we're just removing a cat from the room, which again, like I said, it's a homemade podcast. We're in no studio. I would agree with that. I would say that what the people did is unforgivable, and it's one of those things where I hope they don't work in this sort of capacity again, but at the same time I'm of the same thinking of view that actually we're talking about people that have massive needs, and they need those needs to be met all day every day just to be able to function for everyday life, and to have someone
unskilled
unskilled coming in. And I think that would also be the case as well if we look at schooling with some TAs that are hired to work with autistic students, that it's almost like saying, well, there you go, there's your student, off you go, and you don't really understand the needs, you don't really understand why they're doing things. And
it's crazy,
even now, I mean, I'll speak candidly, I've worked with children with special needs, autism as well, for 10 years, and there's many times that I go, I don't know what that was, I'll have to keep an eye on that, or I'm going to have to adapt, because actually I'm obviously not meeting their needs if that's the reaction or the behaviour that they're representing.
Because I mean, if someone doesn't, I mean, we are, and obviously there's going to be people feeling massively angry towards the individuals involved who being abusive, but my mind always works in a problem solving route.
Yeah.
So I don't get stuck with the anger and looking at individuals. It's about how we move this on and how we make things better. And certainly the way to make things better is pay, and it is incredible training opportunities to get these people before they start working and to have a good understanding.
Yeah.
Because so many people in society still don't understand behaviour when they see someone behaving in a way. There are so many people in society still who look at it as a choice, and I've been on such a journey to that's from like Ollie, from self-injurious behaviours when he's frustrated and his sensory needs aren't met.
Yeah.
And trying to understand that.
I think there is a stigma behind behaviour in public as well.
Totally.
I speak to parents, and in particular, I've got one student at the moment who's in year 7 that's never been to a supermarket.
Yeah.
And never been to a supermarket. That's either when you speak to this child, says it's by choice, doesn't really interest him, but actually I can imagine that is such a stressful environment for a parent to think, what if this happens? Are people going to judge? Is someone going to say something? And I've got like a little statement from the National Autistic Society. I tweeted them a couple of back and forwards, and they said, we're devastated about what happened at Mendip House. We have dismissed several staff as a result, both frontline and management level. We have improved our national systems. For example, we have a new independent whistleblowing line. They go on and say we have increased the frequency of inspections and proactive contact with family members so we can pick up on even minor concerns and put them right quickly. We understand why people are disappointed in us, and we hope we can rebuild that trust in us. They then go on to put a link onto what they've said. They then go on again after I thank them for replying. I said, I thank you for replying. I can tell that your organisation is deeply upset with what has happened. Now is the time to learn from mistakes and be upfront as possible, which I believe you are now doing. Are all the residents rehoused and happy, as they're the most important people in all of this? They replied and said, yes, we have worked to help people find new homes alongside their local councils and of course families. You are right that they are the most important people in all of this, and we're very distraught and distressed that they suffered. They then go on to say the last one, we understand why people are disappointed in us. People put their trust in us and we have let them down. We are devastated by what happened at Mendip House, and we have strengthened our systems as a result so that we can spot poor practice much more quickly and take action much earlier. Now, they're saying all the right things, but as you can imagine...
There's a massive gap there in terms of we will check that people this doesn't happen again. There's nothing about training.
No.
I just listening to you now, there's no element of training in there, and training is so important. Training is so important for supporting, just adults to support needs better, whatever that is. There was no, they're looking at safeguarding, fine, that's great. They're looking at, whistleblowing stuff, that's great. But, are you looking at who you're employing, and are you looking at, the kind of level you're paying them? Are you looking at the training you're giving them before someone starts a job? Because someone will, and then I'll go on about it again, someone will fail. Like if you've got someone, working on your car that's never worked on a car before, and you're expecting them to fix that car or to, whatever, they're going to ruin your car.
Yeah.
And we're talking about people, we're talking about lives.
Yeah.
And it's mad, it's crazy, It is, unbelievable. And we have experience of that, dealing with care in the house for Ollie. In terms of, we would receive someone here, but fortunately it's in the home, and we end up giving the training because they will turn up. They're carers. Okay, but what does that mean?
Yeah.
And like we found as parents, you've got no idea. And as parents of autistic kids or kids with special needs, you haven't got a clue to start with, and it takes a hell of a long time and a lot of training.
And I can imagine that it's not having a child with autism or who is profoundly disabled. I can imagine that it's a very hard thing to put your trust in someone when you know the child so well, and it must be one of those things where it's very difficult to pass over control over to someone else when you know what you do works for you and your family.
Yeah, it is, and you can. Yeah, I think previously with the other issue, the other care home for adults with special needs, where that happened, pretty much similar situation, wasn't it? And it's almost like lessons haven't been learned, and I do feel that it is about a better understanding of supporting people, and that goes on within schools as well. In terms of what we were talking about earlier about just the complex job that it is to support people properly, whatever their needs are.
And I think one of the things again that I learned from yourself and a couple of other people within special schooling and other schools is that there should be no time scale on it, and whatever meets the needs, and it doesn't really matter if that student is missing large portions of their day. I'll give you an example at the moment, because I work in a very supportive mainstream secondary school, that one of my students, he come in and his mother's in a new relationship, went away on holiday with the partner's son, but left my student in England with his father instead. As you can imagine, very confusing for this student, didn't really understand the whole process around it. All he was told is that, what he verbalised was that it was a new family and they wanted to get to know each other. But because this student was left, just as you can imagine, behaviour deteriorated, his speech deteriorated for that couple of weeks when they were away. So straight away, I could see something was wrong, and great credit to the school. I just go to the Senko or go to my assistant Senko and say, we need to put something in place. Absolutely. And because of the trust they put in me, they say, what do you think we need to do? And we'll have a discussion around it. Yeah. And it's a proper discussion, not, well, he's going to miss an hour of history. When's he going to make that up? It's like, what does he need for today? And we'll reassess it tomorrow, and then we'll reassess it the next day, and we'll just see what you can do. And I think that from the special school where we met, that was the thing I took from you, that you shouldn't need to feel the pressure after 10 minutes to go, well, job done, let's get them back in now and we'll move on. Yeah. It should be a more empathetic journey that you're on with the child, because it could be that it's nothing that's happened today and it's something that happened 2 weeks ago. Yeah. And it's just processing it now. And I've forgotten my point in all this, but I think that what I'm trying to say is that there should be no time limit on it, and also there needs to be a deep understanding around the child's needs. And I'm back to our point of training. Maybe that's what is missing in all of this at places like Mendip House.
I think so. I think, really, we both felt when we started out. I mean, my experience was life experience and the journey I've been on, and then you're playing catch up. You're really playing catch up, and my journey into who I am and professionally now has been, and I've had some fab training. I've had really good opportunities in the school I worked at, really, really good training opportunities, which taught me a lot. But for me, the practical skills were the kids that taught me. There's my first kid that I worked with, a non-verbal autistic individual who really, I mean, he taught me so much. His kind of, when things weren't right for him, they were quite extreme in terms of his how he communicated that, quite unpredictable, and I had to up my game massively to try and keep up with that.
Do you think that, because one of the things that I feel when working with children with autism, or especially in the special school where we met, is children are very untrustworthy of adults because of just either the relationships they've had with adults, or when things have gone wrong, it's been because of adults, the people in their life that are controlling and meant to be keeping them safe. Do you think there's an element of testing that goes on when you first start to work with an autistic student, or do you think it varies from person to person?
From the autistic person. Okay, I just think, and
that's a very broad question.
Yeah,
I feel in my case with certain students, I feel there is a testing period where they will look to gain the control that they seek to feel safe in certain areas, and just sort of work around you to start with.
I think this is where massively important, and something I've done a lot of research in this. I did lose a daughter, and I had to learn an awful lot about the brain as well, and that sent me on a kind of learning journey. She had meningitis, and so she had brain damage, and she had some very complex things going on for her, and I had to learn a lot about the autonomic nervous system and things like that to try and understand what was going on for her. And that opened a window for me when I was dealing with kids, and then I've gone on to read a lot of Dan Siegel's work, which is all about understanding of the brain. I think massively important to have an understanding of the brain. So what you're saying is, I think quite often, and I see it quite often, and I can think of students where, so the expected results, so when something happens, you build a neural pathway.
Yeah.
And that becomes normal. So sometimes that can be a negative neural pathway. So I'm not coping, I do this. I'm not coping, I do this. So there's no one there to help me to go this way, so I go this way, which could be when I'm overwhelmed, when I'm massively anxious, no one sort of understands me. No one meets my needs. So I flip my lid,
Yeah.
and I go into my kind of amygdala part of my brain, which is fight or flight, and I'm just, I've got no prefrontal cortex online, so I'm just reactive, and that's just, I go to that,
Yeah.
and that's my behaviour, and it's not even a thought process, but that's what happens. I found that working with the kids, showing them, supporting them, and helping them to go on a different pathway over and over again.
Yeah.
You need it over and over again, and then suddenly, because I remember one lad that we both know, who used to just react, just come in and react, throw things around, whatever it was,
Yeah.
just, hit, punch, whatever it was, over and over again, working with that, trying to get him to realise, trying to build a new neural pathway,
Yeah.
and that actually there's another path. So we're walking down, if there's a field of wheat and you're walking down,
Yeah.
there's one pathway, yeah. So I try to get him to walk down another pathway. So
and
this
that
field of wheat,
automatically
there's another,
would feel
So then
really
you've got two
alien
choices.
to the person, because they've done that same thing, like you said, over and over again, react in this way, and then someone will come in and show them a different path.
Very gently going down that route. And then there's a light bulb moment, and there was a light bulb moment where he came in and said to me, "I'm confused," and I was like, "Oh my god, what?"
Yeah.
You're not kicking and punching. You've just come in and said you're confused. That's just unbelievable. And for me, part of that, having that moment, having these little moments, also kind of, sometimes you're going against the grain, aren't you? Of what reactions to behaviour and stuff, and restraint and whatever else the practices that are out there.
Yeah.
When you have those moments, you're like, oh, I spent 6 months, and I am right.
Yeah.
He's changed. He's managed something. He's managed another route, and it's incredible.
And that's the work that I would say is not second to none, but doesn't go on enough in a variety of different places. I mean, in the special school that we were both at, there was some excellent work that went on there. And again, in the mainstream school where I'm at now, there's some excellent work that goes on. But one of my questions that's going to come up later on is that I'm currently I'm going to finish my degree soon. School have backing me on that, which is excellent. I'm not sure if I want to go down the teaching route. When I looked into the teaching and the NQT and stuff like that and teaching degrees, there wasn't one unit anywhere that's being taught with a special needs unit. Nowhere being taught about autism, nowhere being taught what to do in a case of building strategies or anything like that. And I think that, I keep banging on about it on Twitter, around 6 in 100 people in England are on the autistic spectrum. I think that's got to change. That there's no real training. That what we're saying is that
if you throw into that, if you're just dealing with autistic spectrum, you're dealing with kids who have been abused, neglected, suffer bereavement, all these elements of their childhood that have an impact on them neurologically, so they present differently.
Yeah.
They're not neurologically typical because of the damage that's happened to their brain through nurture or nature, so they may have special needs of some sort. All these kids, that if you're talking 6 out of 100, and then you add the rest of them, where, who knows what numbers we're at with kids in schools. I through personal experience in terms of where my daughters are at school, there's at least 2 or 3 students with some level of disability in each class of 30.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty common now.
Yeah,
at the mainstream school I'm at the moment, there's 1,000 students in the school.
Yeah.
And there's maybe 30 in a class, and I'd say every set 3 or 4 lower set is, full of students like this that needs, not necessarily not being met, but there's a concoction of needs in there that are expected to go with the grain, and everyone's going to follow these same specific rules. What I'm lucky in my job, we're going all over the place here, by the way, but
Yes.
what I'm lucky with in my position is that with the experience that I offer, I am a voice to a certain number of students, and these students, I've been able to bend, shall we say, the behaviour line, because one of the students at the school that I work closely with has many exclusions, and it wasn't until the school asked the question, why is this person getting excluded, was when they understood actually he's so ultra anxious a lot of the time that he can't meet the needs that everyone else is doing, and how can we do that? And it's very difficult for a school to give one person a different strategy, and it took a long time for this school to understand that that is the way they're going to have to go if they want to keep this student here. And I think it's difficult. There must be schools up and down the country that are doing the same thing, and either saying we can meet the needs of this person, or we've tried, or it isn't going to work out.
Yeah, so where I work now, we have referrals from schools and county for students that can't meet the expectations within.
And this is alternative
provision. Yeah. So we have kids that maybe have experienced exclusion from primaries onto another primary, excluded from secondary.
What sort of behaviours would it be? Would it be violence, or would it just be
just a real mix?
Yeah.
A mix of behaviours, whatever that school aren't able to cope with.
And is it a dual placement sometimes, or is it just?
So yeah, sometimes it is. I mean, we could have someone. We have kids that we know of, a number of kids that have no provision, which is not a good thing at all.
No.
I think it's illegal, in terms of what county should be providing. It goes on to a whole other side of things. But yeah, there are kids out there that don't have a provision because there's nowhere out there that the PRUs, they've been excluded. They've gone on to specialist private behavioural units. They've not been able to meet the need, and they're kind of they're out there limbo, and fortunately we meet their needs. We seem to meet their needs quite well.
Yeah. What I would say is, do you think that because of the negative experiences that these children have in schools, where their needs are not being met, or they're just confused, like you said, that young man was, which we both know, do you think that it's hard for a child to think of school in a positive way if their needs are not being met, and then it just makes them ultra anxious, which is just a cycle going on then?
Yeah, there's a story. There's a common thread. There's a common story that I see often. So you have a child, and my wife works in preschools, and she'll see a child in preschool and go, right, this kid needs early intervention.
Yeah.
There is none at preschool level.
No.
And you'll get the thing, give them time. You can't give them a label now. It's not the right time to give them a label. They might be okay at primary, but my wife's, you can recognise it's not going to work out. So this kid, preschool, okay, there's enough staff. There's a play environment. It's a social environment. There's enough leeway. There's no set kind of, it's quite a.
It's like a learn from play sort of atmosphere,
so it's, there's no kind of, the expectations are quite low. Move on to primary school. This same child, and these issues could be, it could be like an undiagnosed autistic spectrum disorder.
Yeah.
It could be, they had trauma in their life. They might have had an early bereavement. They may have been neglected. Any of those factors, abused.
Yeah.
So they arrive and they don't have the skills to manage. Okay, so, and often they are in that kind of fight or flight zone because life has been so terrifying. And that goes for autistic kids as well, because I do feel there's like quite a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder stuff going on for kids with ASD, kids who find the world more difficult to understand, process, or whatever that is.
I'd say that's the case, especially.
You walk into like an environment that's like, oh my god, what's going on? You've been at home, everything's safe, So these kids, right? So whatever their background, they kind of muddle through preschool. They get to reception, and they can't cope. They don't have the skills to cope, and no one's there to support that. So they start to fail in that environment, or they are failed in that environment. So they then are labelled as naughty because the reception teacher is trying to deal with 30 young children who are running all over the place, and there's this one child who is, I don't know, whatever,
just against the
drinking
grain.
the paint, or whatever it is, or throwing the paint against the wall, because to him, we're painting.
Yeah.
I'll paint a wall. He's not got the understand. He's not, for whatever reason, whereas he's never been in a structured environment. He can't get on with other students because he doesn't have the social skills yet. Maybe not have the opportunities. Maybe he has autistic spectrum disorder, where he can't understand. He hasn't got theory of mind, so he doesn't understand that someone else might want to play with the thing that he's playing with.
Yeah.
It's not a behaviour. It's just he doesn't have the skills, and so he's naughty, and then that gets that reputation, gets sent out. Whatever that looks like, and very quickly self-esteem, resilience, all that is rock bottom. You're now dealing with a child who doesn't feel comfortable in a school environment, doesn't feel comfortable around adults, teachers particularly, and then this child grows up, and they're reactive rather than receptive to anything because everything is against them, and that's just heading one way. But if these kids could be supported earlier on and recognise the skills that are lagging, what that is, whether that's a social interaction issue, whether that's whatever it is, get in there. I mean, you do it with a kid who struggles to read. You're presented with a kid who struggles to read, they probably get an extra bit of TA in and support and around that. They wouldn't be told they were naughty. No. They wouldn't be told they're lazy. I know we're moving on. I know that things are changing, but we've still got a long way for that understanding.
There's still a bit way to go. But with the boys that I work with closely at the moment, so I was hired by a mainstream secondary school as an autism specialist to basically guide 3 students through their school lives. The 3 boys that I teach, before they come to me, they were out of school for 3 years, all of them out for 3 years. So one boy in particular, whenever things start to get a little stressful for him, because again, it's a mainstream secondary school, 1,000 students, there's certain things in a day that are out of our control. And when they do sometimes go a little bit wrong, he'll say, I don't like school, do I? And it's because the previous schooling that he's got haven't necessarily scarred this student, but it's so ingrained to him now is, I fail in school. I can't do this. I'm not doing this.
Totally.
And it's very difficult to get around that mental health aspect of it, as well as them dealing with the autism and meeting that child's need. And I think that's a common thread that I would see now, is that a lot of the students that are coming through to secondary school or coming through primary school, there's an aspect of poor mental health in there as well now, because of just feeling not worthy of being in school.
100%. It's a big part of it. I mean, you can't, if you've got a mountain to climb, and I've said this to one of the students I work with, and I said to him, I do understand that for you, coming to school is like climbing a mountain, whereas it's walking down a street for most of the other individuals in the school. So if you're trying to climb a mountain while everyone's walking down the street and you're being shouted at for being slow, are you ever going to get to the top of that mountain? You know what I mean? If people are, it's a basic misunderstanding that these kids are working 4 or 5 times harder than any other student in that school.
Yeah.
Just to get through the door, let alone get into a classroom, and that's missed quite a lot. I think that really is missed and not understood.
That children are coming in ultra anxious before they've even stepped in the door.
Yeah.
They're on high alert.
Totally. Yeah. And that's why the support needs to be, so much better than it is currently, I think. and expectations need to be reframed in terms of, you know, what the curriculum looks like for those students, what really is important, you know, what's going to be important for them in their lives, what are they good at, you know, what are their skills, because you want to build on those skills they have, because so many kids, I think all kids have a skill, you know, no matter what it, you know, they have something, whether it's, you know, I don't know, just you know, a programming skill, or just uncovering that, because, you know, I think everyone in this world has an ability. You know, my profoundly disabled son has taught me masses, and he could teach so many people things. And, you know, there's someone who can't do anything for himself. He can't talk. He needs to be fed. He needs to be changed. Can't use the toilet. Can't walk. Can't use his. He can't. You know, but he's incredible in terms of what he can give and do for the world, and everyone has something.
Everyone has something to give. I'd say within my experiences is normally the more creative subjects where these children come alive. So at the moment, a big one that I'm using at the moment is music. Now, I can't play anything, you know, I'm not a musician. That isn't the way that I'm wired. I'm more, you know, I've got different skills, but the 3 students that I have at the moment, they're coming up to their GCSEs. The options that they want to choose: music, art, and drama, performing arts. And they're the ones that they want to work around, rather than, you know, English, which is such a massive subject for even just to pick up a pen, for example, the anxiety that causes and stuff like that. What I want to get into, though, is when you worked in the special school and you worked in the base, which was like safe haven, it was like almost just a place where the students could come out of class if they weren't coping and coming in. What was the sort of place that you wanted to create while working in the base, and what were some of the strategies that you put in place, or did it vary from student to student, or was there a common thread that would always work, or work most of the time?
So I've worked on this from where I've worked and where I'm working now, and then some of the reading I've done, some of the research and stuff. And there's obviously, I keep mentioning this guy called Dan Siegel, who is a doctor and a neuro psychologist, psychotherapist, whatever. He's basically done it all, and he bases everything around the brain and stuff. Now, if I can find it, so basically the first step is becoming attuned with the young person. So it's kind of like just dropping any of your kind of expectations, thoughts, what they should be doing, and just trying. I think that's why you probably saw me quite quiet in the classroom. Quite quiet. I look at the non-verbal signals and try and understand what's going on.
Just for example, in the school, just if we've missed out a bit, is if in class the students were not meeting expectations, is a horrible term, but let's say they were struggling and distressing other students in the class, the members of staff in the base, which you like co-run, didn't you? Would be called, and we would either phone them and say a student's coming up your way because they were able to leave the class, or if they got in that place where the term I use with some of my boys at the moment is digging yourself in your trench. You've dug yourself in it and you just need a hand to get out. That's when you would come into a class and try and give them that hand.
So I just think it's always attuning with them. So, and it's just going down the empathy route, and empathy is massive in terms of reaching people. So, and it is about, it's not about, so if someone's telling you, I don't know, Billy looked at me and I'm massively angry. Okay, with obviously swear words and whatever that is. You never go down the route of, well, no, that's not something to get upset about. It's the route you go down is, that must be really tough. I can see you're really angry, really upset, and it's just building on that empathy. As soon as they're heard, they'll connect. And once you've got a connection, you're halfway there. And then it's having that understanding of the brain as well, to understand that they're in their fight or flight zone, they're in their amygdala, there's no thought process going on. So you can't expect them to start having a thought process about what I'm doing, because they're not there. They're completely not there. So expectations have to drop out the floor. You have to become their thought process, their guide in those moments where they've lost control. And I mean, sometimes I can remember walking with people, just being there beside them, being a physical presence in the room. If someone's smashing the classroom up, you could just sit quietly, be there, just being there. And with that, there's something there where it brings someone down. You in that moment, communication is not a good thing.
Would you say that the initial step in building that relationship is key? So even though they might not necessarily know you really well,
yeah.
and they might not trust you, but they'll know that that's where you are and that's what you do.
I think so.
Rather than
it's a consistent approach, isn't it? I think a lot of adults don't have very good emotional balance sometimes, and they're working in a school and they bring some of the stuff they bring into school sometimes. And I think I've read it somewhere, I can't remember who it was, but the most important thing for a parent or a teacher to be is the one thing in their life that is able to remain calm in a crazy environment.
And I suppose that's where you'll get the escalated behaviour. If the child, for example, when you said, Billy's looking at me, if the teacher would just say, can you be quiet please, because I'm speaking, that then would almost, as again, I've got lots of terms that I use with my boys that are more just, they're all trigger points. So that for me would say that's climbing your ladder. Yeah. You're going, this is annoying me, now I'm mad because I've gone up the next step, now I'm moving on to something else. And I suppose what you're saying is that if you get in there and you are a little bit human, you have a bit of empathy, and that must really upset you, all of a sudden that will bring their guard down, like,
totally.
You get it.
You know what it's like when you're with your partner. If you're having a moment and they're telling you there's no reason for you to have a moment, where are you going to go with that?
Yeah.
You are going to flip your lid, aren't you?
Yeah.
I am having a moment. You're not telling me that I'm not, because actually I am.
Yeah.
And if she said to you, "Oh, Dave, I can see you're upset.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk to me about it?" It's quite simple. And it's dropping the expectations you have, because you revisit that later. So if you look, so Ross Green, Dr. Ross Green, who wrote Explosive Child, I think, and Lost at School. He has an approach called the collaborative problem solving, which is called something else now as well, I think. But he talks about you will notice that each of your children that you work with will have common issues, and he has a list of them, and you can look through them, and it'll be frustration tolerance, sensory issues in certain environments. The list is quite long, but it almost covers everything, and you kind of tick that off. You're like, oh yeah, so Brian, every time he goes to maths, same problem, whatever that is. And he's got a really good system that works really well, I think, maybe not with sort of lower end primary, but further up, where you come in with that empathy approach. I've noticed that in maths, X and Y happens. What's up with that? Tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
So you're talking about it away from when the incident's happening, you've calmed down, it's a day later. And then you work through that, and they're like, wow, this, that, and you need to kind of really nail down on that to make sure you understand what the issue is. Because sometimes they might not know. They might need to work through that. And then the next part of that is putting in your issues. So the adult issues would be, okay, well, his answer might be, so you need problem solve together. So you'd be like, how would you solve this issue? For you, how would it work? We want to make it better for you. He might be like, I won't go to maths then. You're like, well, my things are, I need you to be in maths because you need to know maths. Okay, so you've got to problem solve. So you're teaching the kids to problem solve on their own.
Yeah.
You're not questioning about their behaviour. You're just saying this happens. How do we make it better? And how do you think you can do it? You work together, and then you create you solve a problem together, and then you put it in place. But before you put it in place, you say it's going to fail. It's going to fail. You know, it can fail. It's not a problem. Put it in place, and we'll see how it goes, and we'll revisit it. And it's amazing. And if you read any of his books, it talks about it, and it's an incredible approach. And it's I think it's sweeping the US at the minute. It's been taken up by schools, and it's really positive. And it is about empathy. It's about not seeing the behaviour for the behaviour, and it's understanding. Basically, the key thing is that his thing is a kid will do well if he can. Okay, and that's it. Not if he wants to. The kid will do well if he can, and the can bit is dependent on the skills he has. So if he's failing in a classroom, he's failing socially in a playground or whatever, it's because there's a lagging skill. There's a skill he hasn't got, and that skill he hasn't got can be taught, can be supported, could be and that and it's just it's identifying that, understanding it, and we're educators, and that's what we should be doing. You don't put people in seclusion or isolation or whatever it is, or that doesn't teach anything. No. That's kind of another viewpoint on me. I don't think rewards and consequences work in a school environment.
No, and I suppose that it almost goes back to your very first point, all of this, and being in tune with the child, because you just listed 3 or 4 really, really positive ways in which worked for you. I mean, obviously they wouldn't work every time, but when you were to, say, calm that student enough, did you then have individual strategies that you would do? So you'd recognise, hang on a minute, this person's going to need a little bit more work here, because because I can sense that even though they're calm now, there's still that seed.
Definitely.
So
I mean, there's a graph, isn't there, in terms of I think they call it the something cycle, the assault cycle. It's where when you become dysregulated, how long it takes to become calm again.
Okay.
And it can be up to 2 hours.
Yeah. And
to expect a child who's completely flipped get back into a classroom again, it's just going to be a repeating cycle.
Yeah.
And that can be a fight in terms of, like you say, the expectations to get back into class, and you're like, we're just going to see this happen again if we're going to go back in.
Yeah.
And sometimes the pressures are to have that child back in, and you kind of have to find some way of enabling that not to happen. But that's tricky within the school environment, because expectations are to be in lessons no matter what.
Yeah.
So.
Did you find when you worked in the base that it was the same students were either causing the issues in class, shall we say, or the same children, for example, that would just check in with you at different points of the day, almost just to make sure that the consistent is still here? Just poke their head round.
Yeah.
Not really have to say anything, but just hello, and they might say hello 2 or 3 times in that day, just to come and see.
You build up little patterns where that even without realising, sometimes you do things and then you look back on it and you go, okay, I get that now. So you just happen to feel, and that's what I think working with your gut is massively important. To go with what you feel is right with young people sometimes, because if you overthink it, you get contrasting opinions and stuff, and actually just going with it. So, I remember taking one young person to class every morning, just getting through into the classroom. Just they'd walk in, not much communication, then walk, and then drop off, and then come back, leave them there. And then realising without that, they weren't able to get through the door.
Yeah.
And you just do little things where, a little game of football with someone, or it's just little things that they needed to regulate. And that's quite interesting on the whole kind of, I suppose we haven't brought up the name of this, with sensory, sensory processing stuff. The regulation, sensory regulation and stuff is massively important as well, isn't it? And building that into a timetable and for some young people is really important.
Yeah. Now, a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, we are talking as like it's just simple things that get put in place. But I suppose for a lot of people listening to this, these simple things are not being done in the provisions where they are. So I'll give you an example of something that I used when I was interviewing for another job, and they thought that it was like the most incredible thing they've ever heard strategy wise. Whereas to me, it was just quite simple that I had a student that just one day decided he didn't want to go into class anymore and didn't really understand what was going on. And then I realised it was because the person that he expected to be in the room wasn't there.
Yeah.
She was taken away. She's driving the minibus. Things in schools, they change really quickly. So I thought I'm just going to do a visual timetable. So I did a visual timetable, a few days, get reported back, still not working, he's still not coming to class. Like, right, okay, what have I done here? So I looked at what I did and I thought, you know what I've done? I've just got cartoons. I haven't got pictures of the room. I know what I do. I'll get pictures of the room. A couple of days later or a couple of weeks later, it's worked, but not really that much. And then when I worked all the way back, I realised I think it's because that TA wasn't in the room. How about I just do pictures of staff instead?
Yeah.
So I did a keychain, just pictures of staff. 6 months, went in every single lesson. That was until I left, that it was still being used effectively. And obviously it's, time consuming, and if someone's off that day, you need to get random pictures of people really quickly, build up a bank. But these are the sort of things that many mainstream schools, I would say, that I've come into contact with have never done or never considered these sort of things.
That's definitely your skill. You're really good at you're always really good at that kind of pre-planning, thinking around and then putting things in place to support. Really amazing. Like, even with your DT stuff you did with supporting students understand where they're at in terms of that whole kind of program you created, so that a young person knew where they were in terms of working through the stuff they had to do, which is all visual and it's amazing. And it's like, oh wow, that everyone could use that, because sometimes you don't know where you are with stuff. And then obviously stuff like timetables for young people who didn't know which parents or carers they're going home each weekend have profound effect on that week for them, because they would be anxious because they didn't have the ability to kind of like process and plan and think and hold the memory of what was going to happen at the weekend. They were just very much in the moment and worry about stuff.
I think the way that I think, I know it's very similar to you, that is, this is the behaviour, this is the actions that are happening. I don't really think we should ignore this behaviour or these actions. I think we should try and help them. And one thing that always stuck in my mind, I remember I was talking to Steve, who we're going to have an interview with in the next few days, and I mentioned to Steve, I'm thinking about doing a social story for this autistic student when they go swimming and when they come back, about what their friends have been doing. And I remember speaking to Steve and he was like, yeah, that's a good idea. And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to bounce it off Nick. And what you said to me was, doesn't every person with autism deserve a social story to know what they're doing? And that's when the light bulb clicked for me even more. That was, well, yeah, of course they do. Why am I even sort of questioning it? And I think that these are the things that, if parents and education professionals, if they reflect on the behaviour, there's always that seed of where it started. It's just about searching through, and it could take days, weeks, months. You don't know. But
there's an incredible resource. I don't know if you want to talk about resources, but there's two books. So I started following a while back on Facebook a guy called Bill Nasson, and he had the autism discussion page, and it was a really interesting Facebook page because he would work through some subjects on autism, and he would like just write a big kind of like blog or whatever, I don't know what you call it on Facebook, on something, and it was just profoundly amazing every time. It's like, wow. And I used to read it all the time, to the point where everyone on that page was like, you've got to bring these out as books. And he has done. He's brought 2 books out, and they're like Bibles. They are, honestly, they're just every kind of possible situation, every strategy you could think of, an understanding of autism, and I think there's pretty much all in there. So it's a toolbox for helping children with autism feel safe, accepted, and competent. And that's kind of his thing, is with all these young people, they need to feel safe, accepted, and competent. And I love that, because that addresses everything, doesn't it? For a child to come into whatever setting it is, to feel safe, competent, so they feel that they're worthwhile and accepted, that they are part of that community.
Yeah.
And that's just everything that's needed. And I mean, the books are incredible if you ever get a chance. And also, he's still on Facebook, and he still applies stuff. But some of the stuff just going through strategy stuff, I just took a couple of things out in terms of strategies that just a variety, just to give you an idea. So when, say, you have a young person going into an environment, clarifying and spelling out the hidden meanings to them. So almost like imagine for them they were visiting China, and they don't, imagine you're visiting China and you wouldn't understand the customs. You're going to sit down for a meal, you would have no idea about the customs, the expectations of sitting down for that meal. It's having someone there that can talk you through that before you go in there, and it's really important just to share that with maybe someone that's going into an environment that that you're working with, before you get in there. Look, this is to help with their anxiety. Look, this is what's going to happen. You're going to have this, that. Someone here is going to be there. Whatever. It's really important. Always using concrete and literal language where you can, so they aren't lost in in the kind of
in a grey area.
Grey areas, yeah. Prepare before going to events. What might happen and what might be expected. Talk through what other people might be thinking and feeling. Thinking out loud, I think, is really good. So you model for someone who doesn't, can't think through situations. If you're with them and you're talking through it, oh, that's strange. That's happened. I wonder how I'm going to deal with that. And you're modelling your thought processes, and they can hear that, and they'll take that on board. So things that don't come, with the executive function, that part of the brain where you're planning and all that, you don't share with other people generally. And it's for neurotypical people that it just happens.
Yeah.
You walk into an environment, you walk into my house today, you're able to deal with stuff you weren't expecting, when you didn't know who was going to be here, and you just dealt with that. But that's really tricky for someone on the spectrum quite often. And if you're with them and you're walking into new environments, for them it's just talking through what's going on through your brain, which I think is really a really cool little.
Yeah. Do you think that's a very important thing to remember then, when just talking through everyday things with, autistic children, but in particular, lots of children? I can imagine that there's gaps in everyone's
100%.
understanding and learning.
Totally.
And I think that while you're talking, I'm reflecting on myself and thinking, well, I actually do that already, but I do it almost as a tool to ease anxiety.
Yeah.
And so
that's what it's definitely there for, the anxiety bit, because and also they're learning for them, because that's not something that's taught in schools. How do you deal with how do you deal with walking through the door of somewhere at school, or what happens when and it's only through hearing it, or obviously and seeing it.
And I find also that with this stuff it can be very, very difficult to do. Like when I first started at the mainstream school that I'm at now, I requested to do some PSE and life skills stuff so that I could reflect with the students on when things have gone not so good for them in class or not so good for them in social environment, and we would reflect on it either through comic stripping or just through a discussion, or we would do it through play. Like a good way is doing it through sport. I find that is a very positive way, that you just get a table tennis table up, and you just hit the ball and stuff comes out of the student because they're so relaxed and they're working on something else. And I would say, in my experience, for the students to touch on these things where they may not get it right is very, very difficult, and it also can bring up those feelings again because they're reliving it. And I suppose it takes an understanding school and an understanding provision for when you do those things, because I would let my colleagues know now in the mainstream school, I'm going to be doing this work with this pupil. If you hear shouting or if you hear, a couple of little knocks and things, everything's fine.
Yeah.
We're just working through that, and we would have with one student, I would give him a bouncy ball, and he would be like Rocky Balboa, just bounce against the wall the whole time.
Yeah.
And he'd speak with me, and when it was over, that's when he'd start again.
Yeah.
Another student we had, he would colour, and another one it was maybe ripping old books up, which we had our own little box, which was for him. You could destroy anything in there, pens, pencils, rubbers, things like that. And even though, that might not be, the way that works for other people, that kind of works for the way that I do it, that I feel like that these subjects are so important to reflect on, and even if it is very difficult for the child, it is worthwhile down the road.
I think that's where the CPS approach can work really well, where you're because of, like you're saying, the anxiety and stress around them feeling shamed or whatever that is around the situation that happened, should be a common feeling for them through, like we're saying, through their history of getting perceived to be getting it wrong in other provisions. Then kind of that plan B of Dr. Ross Green works really well in terms of like hitting that empathy first. So it's never brought up as his words are always, so and so's happened, what's up? It's never accusatory. It's always like, oh, I've seen this. Oh, tell me about it. Or it's not. But yeah, that kind of the other elements of that in terms of working through it with different things. I was thinking also on the same side through meeting sensory needs. So the number of times I've had pretty much non-verbal autistic young people, and I've put them on a basket swing or a swing and swung for about 20 minutes and then had the most insane conversations with them because they're grounded, the anxiety's gone, their sensory needs are met. 20 minutes of really good swinging, like your arms are killing you, you're pushing them for 20 minutes solid. You suddenly see a change in their face. It could be on a trampoline, it could be something. Suddenly, and this is what I get with Ollie as well, if we don't meet your sensory needs, that kind of sensory diet, if you don't fulfill that, because we don't understand what that feels like.
No.
Like literally, like you can't understand what it feels like to, not feel right the whole time until, you've been on the craziest roller coaster in the world and you come off it like, actually I feel normal now. Like I had this conversation recently with a young man, autistic young man, and so it's, normally conversations can be from, I don't know, Fireman Sam or whatever, just kind of random but really fun, to be on the swing for 20 minutes discussing neurologically what effect the swing was having on his brain, and him being involved in that conversation fully and saying to me, and the outcome of that is, I don't feel safe unless I'm on a swing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Like, and and then, so maybe sometimes those difficult conversations can be had when you're meeting the need, when you've got them in the right place, when you've got them, and also, building that into a day, building that, that sensory diet at the beginning of a day, 20 minutes of swinging, and then they're able to go into a classroom and cope for a bit.
Yeah.
Because, I can't even, like, for me, I suppose it's like, I feel really sick if I spin around.
Yeah.
It's kind of the opposite. So it's like, I think sometimes that spinning feeling is normal. Like, your kind of your proprioception and your vestibular senses are all over the shop. So you just feel kind of odd the whole time until you do something that makes you feel okay. So, there's no wonder you feel anxious and stressed, as well as your kind of social understanding and the rest of it. It's massive. I think, autistic people dealing with a neurotypical world are incredible. It's just nuts what they are, that they cope with.
Yeah.
There's a great, can I just read something real quick?
Yeah.
because I put that in now. So this guy, Bill Nasson, it's a bit long. I hope
That's
it's
okay.
fine. But it's just, I think it sums things up really nicely. I tried to print it out, but my printer's kind of...
That's all right.
But I love this. So it's embracing neurodiversity. So this is by Bill Nasson. It amazes me that the world does not embrace neurodiversity better. With each unique set of processing styles, we expand our perspectives and knowledge of the world. Some of us are global thinkers, some are visual organisers. Others think in numbers or artistic patterns. There are many forms of intelligence and creativity. Each processing style is programmed by the brain's hardwiring, but can be fine-tuned with repetition and practice. Some people are socially focused and relate on social and emotional level, while others are more object-orientated, with great detail from mechanical design, graphic arts, computer sciences, etc. Some have a natural intuitive ability for beauty, arts and music. Their minds think in rhythmic patterns and beautiful form designs. Some have great imaginations in the areas of science and medicine, others in architectural design and mechanical or electrical engineering. Neurodiversity offers us the best of all worlds by combining and sharing the perspectives of all thinking styles. I love experiencing the world from different perspectives and learning to see life from shades of glasses. Different perspectives allow us to expand our horizons and improve the quality of our lives. Look at the advances we have made in science, technology and arts. From many who think radically different from each other, our lives are now patterned by technology that was designed by the most diverse thinkers. We seem to be scared of different thinking styles. We immediately try to suppress thinking styles that do not match the norm, especially in schools where diverse thinking is often suppressed because it doesn't match the normative teaching learning styles. Our schools should be looking for diverse talents that can be fostered instead of suppressed, encourage different ways of thinking and constructing the world, letting the child unfold what comes natural for them, providing a facilitative environment for nourishing diverse thinking, celebrating differences and sharing different perspectives to enlighten us all. Neurodiversity is becoming more accepted and the world is reaping the benefits of expanding our perspectives, both culturally and economically. Please encourage our schools and institutions not to immediately interpret these differences as negative, as something to suppress, but to redefine them as possible strengths that we can foster into expanding perspectives. Broaden your vision, encourage diversity and expand our window. So I just really like that because it totally resonates with me in terms of what I feel. You know, all these kids have so much to bring, you know, and I think we both know kids that we work with, particularly in the school that we shared, that some of the kids there were like incredible thinkers.
Yep.
Despite us being in an SEN school, that label kind of gives the impression of, you know, higher
something
need.
else, yeah.
And quite a lot of the adults have that kind of impression sometimes that they're less than or need more support, but actually, you know, they have incredible ability. Like you have discussions that you're just totally like you've no idea what they're on about because they're just so far beyond your understanding of what, you know, their focus and incredible kind of understanding of different things. It's just crazy.
Yeah.
And everyone has a place in society. Like I was saying with
100%.
Ollie, you know, and it is a shame that you know, curriculums are so narrow.
Yeah.
What
we'll do is we're going to stop there,
yeah.
and we'll pick up part 2 another time.
Yeah.
And because we've gone over an hour, and it's quite an effort to listen to an hour. So we'll stop there. I'm going to wrap up with Nick, and we will catch up with this next time. Okay, we'll do a 2-parter.